So today I'm going to show you how you can make your text go from this to this. So to give some context, I was scrolling through Instagram and I got an ad for a certain typeface. Honestly, it was a really cool typeface, but since it was a specialty decoration kind of typeface, I didn't really have a lot of use for it at the time. But since I did like it, I thought, what if I tried to make it myself? So then I just started messing around in Photoshop, and that's how I got the effect that I just showed you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you exactly how I got the effect, but I'm also going to point out some different ways that you can tweak it so you can make it your own. So don't think of this as a step-by-step tutorial, rather a starting point for your own creativity. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. All right, so this is the final design that I came up with using the typography. I've saved all the steps using smart objects, so that way I can take you through the entire process. So let's jump to the very beginning. So this is where I started, where I just used a bold sans serif typeface. That's kind of my go-to. It's something that I really enjoy using, but you could easily switch this out for a different font and see if maybe you get some different results. But the reason I chose a bold sans serif typeface is because whenever we do some effects later, it kind of plays into the kind of bubbly effect that you see in the final results. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to save this as well as a white background as a smart object. It's important that you include the background in it as well because it's going to affect some of the effects later down the road. So once we've done that, we can start adding on the effects. So here's that smart object. I already went ahead and turned off all the filters and effects so you can see what it looks like from the very beginning. Now the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a Gaussian blur. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that effect on, and you can see that's what it looks like. I don't really have an exact amount that I would say you would need to add in order to get this effect, but here's a little tip to help you. So if you've got the Gaussian blur pop-out window up and you have preview checked, you can see what the text is going to look like whenever you apply it. So what I would look for is the text whenever it starts to curve. So since we chose a sans serif typeface, that has a lot of angles to it. So what I did is I brought the Gaussian blur up and to the point at which the ends started to look kind of circular and not so angular. So if I go ahead and turn the preview off, you can tell this looks very angular. It's just straight across. But if I add the preview, it starts to look a little bit more rounded and a lot softer. And that's a big part of how you get this effect. Obviously, you can do what you want. You could try adding less Gaussian blur. You could try adding more. It really just depends on what you want to try and just kind of experimenting to see what the effects are. The next step is to just distort the type a little bit. And what I did is I added some zigzag and some wave. So here's what it looks like with those. Me personally, I didn't want to push the effects too hard to where it distorted it a lot, but you could definitely do that and see what you can come up with. And for quick reference, this is the settings that I have for zigzag, and this is the settings that I have for wave. Once again, you can play with those yourself and see what else you can come up with. Now the next step is extremely important, and what you want to do is you want to add a displacement map to the text. Now here's what it looks like with the displacement map that I applied to it. And for reference, this is the displacement map that I used. You're probably not going to have the exact same textures or displacement maps as me, so really you'll just have to use whatever you have on hand. Now looking at the results so far, it looks kind of wonky and bad, but trust me, it all works out in the end. Now the last step that's actually required to get this effect is you add on an effect from the filter gallery. So here's what it looks like whenever we add on that effect. Now the effect that I'm using is the torn edges one, but you could also use stamp or notepaper. And once again, here's the settings that I used for it. And feel free to play around with the variables so that way you can kind of make your own and you can get the effect that you're looking for that's going to work best for your project. Now you could definitely stop there, but there's one more thing that I did to get the results that I showed you at the beginning. And to do that, we'll need to jump into Illustrator. All right, so now that we're in Illustrator, let me show you what I did. So the very last thing that I did to get this effect was I turned the text into a vector. So I'm going to show you exactly what the differences are, even though that they're kind of subtle, but I just wanted to show you just in case that you wanted to get something a little bit smoother or a little bit different. So on the left here, we have the original that I just showed you, and on the right, we have the vector version. Now I don't want to lie and act like it's a huge difference, but if you're looking to make the text look like a font, this is the way to go. So in order to do this, what you're going to do is you're going to drop the JPEG into Illustrator, and then you're going to select it and open up the Image Trace tab. And in order to do that, you can go to Window and then go down to Image Trace. But for me, I already have it set up to the side so I can just easily click on it. So there's a bunch of different options in order to turn this into a vector. So what I did is I opened this and I went to Silhouette. hit OK. But we have these options here that we can play around with. Together, they kind of act like a simplification tool. So if the effect that you got in Photoshop is a little bit too drastic for what you're looking for, you can use these two sliders to kind of figure out the amount of simplicity that you want. And then once you land on settings that you want, all you have to do is click expand and you should be good to go. Now you can just move it onto the artboard and export it as a PNG, bring it back into Photoshop and do whatever else you want to it. And that's how I ended up with this design that you see here. I went through all the steps that I just showed you, and then I put it back into Photoshop, and then I just created a design based on that text. I think one of the coolest things about working with typography in Photoshop is that there's so many options that you can do, and you can always make things smart objects so that way you can go back later, change some variables, save it, and then see how it updates. And I definitely want to encourage you to follow your instincts and do what you think is best and not follow this tutorial step by step. All the settings that I use probably aren't going to work for you anyways, so it's best that you just kind of embrace that and just do your own thing. But if you did find this tutorial helpful, I'd appreciate if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next video. Hello, can I help you? Hello, how are you?